friends. I hope everyone is well. I'd like to spend a few minutes today talking with you about salt. I find that as both a cooking instructor and a health coach, this is a topic that I tend to spend a lot of time on, both because people are confused about the amount of salt they should be consuming and the type of salt they should be consuming. And I think many of us have been trained to be fearful of salt. And while there are certain health conditions for which it's very important that we monitor salt closely, apart from that particular population, most of us can enjoy a small amount of salt in each of our meals. So the RDA, or recommended daily allowance, and this is the upper limit, is 2,300 milligrams per day. And that's roughly equivalent to 1 teaspoon, which if you think about it, if you actually get your teaspoon out and look at it, it's quite a lot of salt. Now, if you do all of your own cooking, which of course is what I recommend, it would be very, very difficult to use a whole teaspoon of salt in one day. You're gonna add a little pinch here and a little pinch there. But the problem comes in when most of us are looking outside of the home for food, right? So we're busy, we end up picking up something from a restaurant or a market, or we're eating processed or packaged foods. This is where the problems come in. So there's so much added sodium to processed and packaged foods because it makes them taste better. So we have to be very, very watchful for that. The other thing that can be a little bit sneaky are the prepared condiments. So if you have, like most of us, you open your fridge and you've got this whole wall full of condiments, take a look at the sodium count. And just to give you some point of reference, 1 tablespoon of soy sauce has 1,000 milligrams of sodium. So that's almost half of your daily allowance right there. And most of us are going to use, a couple of tablespoons if we're enjoying something like sushi. So just, be sort of watchful there. That's sort of, I think, where people get snagged. But here's the deal. If you are doing your own cooking, I want to talk to you about the benefits of using good unprocessed salt. So what is the best type of salt? I tend to recommend for most folks now that they use Himalayan pink salt. So unfortunately, the latest research and findings have revealed some of the downstream effects of ocean pollution. So all of the plastic that floats around in the ocean has now unfortunately contaminated a lot of our sea salt supply. So this is something that was just recently discovered and reported more widespread. So you can look that up if you want on your own. But Himalayan pink salt is something that is sourced in the Himalayan mountains and most notably in Pakistan. And this is a salt that is not derived from the sea, and so it tends to be something now that I find to be a safer bet. So Himalayan pink salt, it's something I just love. It's got roughly 84 trace elements and minerals, so things like magnesium, potassium, zinc, copper, iodine even. So all kinds of good stuff there. And whereas a commercial refined processed salt has all of that stuff stripped away. It's often been bleached. And then it also often has these anti-caking agents, which usually contain trace amounts of aluminum, which we know is totally health hazardous. So I personally stay away from processed commercial salt myself, and I recommend that you do as well. So the Himalayan is great. What are some other wonderful things about Himalayan salt or sea salt in general, if it weren't for the plastic? Salt is really important for nerve and cell health. It's super important, actually. It's an electrolyte. So in order to have proper electrolyte balance, so good heart functioning, right? You need to have a balanced amount of both sodium and potassium. In order to have a proper pH or acid alkaline balance, it's important to have sodium. So you're starting to see how important it is. The other thing that's really interesting is that if you want to actually retain some of the super hydration that we're all recommended to undertake, so these 8 glasses of water a day, you have to have a small amount of salt because water follows salt into the cells of your body. So if you have that little bit of salt in each of your meals, you'll retain some of that extra hydration more efficiently. And so I think that's a really interesting benefit. I actually worked with a client once who had told me she felt like she wasn't retaining any of the water that she was drinking. She actually felt like her body was like a dry desert, where the water was just sort of rolling off of her. And that's what happens. If you don't retain the water, you just eliminate it. And so we in fact found out that she had eliminated salt from her diet. So I recommended that she put a little bit back in, and all was well. So super interesting. And then finally, the last thing I wanted to talk to you about is how many of you are looking for ways to enhance the flavor of your food without adding tons and tons of salt. So, having said that a little bit of salt is good, let's focus now on some kind of practical ways that you can enhance or add flavor to the foods that you're cooking without adding additional salt. So actually, if you become a really skilled cook, you'll learn that balance of flavors is really the key to making everything delicious. It's not just about, dumping salt onto your food. So really the key is to have a balance of salty, sweet, bitter, and sour. And so I'm going to give you an example of like my perfect dish that comes to mind. An Italian salad that has shaved fennel, bitter, sliced orange, sweet, some chopped olives, salty, and then a fresh lemon vinaigrette, sour, right? So that's like a perfect balance of flavors. And I think it's really important to keep in mind that salt and acid are in fact the things that help zip up flavor in food. But if you have the proper balance of all of those things going on, then you won't have to really go crazy with salt. So the other things you can work with are spice and fresh or dried herbs. So I love adding fresh basil or dried oregano or crushed red pepper flakes or a little bit of hot sauce. Just make sure your hot sauce doesn't have like added sodium or sugar and things like that. You can make your own hot sauces too. So that is really kind of my best tip, best practice for flavoring your foods, and you'll figure it out, right? It takes practice. All of this takes practice. And really it's all about balance in the end, right, friends? It's all about balance. So I hope that was helpful. I wish you well, and until next time, take care.